America is in trouble. We've turned our backs on God, forsaken our history, and too easily succumb to tyrannical orders. Our problem seems overwhelming, but the solution is simple. It's time we return to the Lord in strict adherence to the Constitution of the United States.
Welcome to the Constitution Solution, one podcast under God. We're your hosts, Mark DeLuzio and Christy Tyrone. Now, let's get on with the show.
Welcome to episode 15 of the Constitution Solution, one podcast under God. Christy Tyrone, Mark DeLuzio. Christy, how you doing today?
Doing good.
You look great.
Thanks. I rearranged my office.
You look bright. If you're looking on YouTube, Christy really looks great. She has her book in the back, up on top. And you have a skeleton back there. What is that about? Is that somebody that you...
A little shrunken head. It's from Disneyland from back when I was a kid, and from the Pieces of Eight store outside of the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. I just think he's so
I might
cool
do an episode on Disneyland. It's one of my worst places I've ever been to. I hate it.
I used to love it, but now I'm like, one, I don't like crowds, and two, I don't like
it has nothing to do with the liberalism of it. I just cannot stand it. Anyway, so Christy, what are we going to talk about today? I think this is episode 15. This is like a part two. We did part one of this on episode 14 called The Tyranny of the Fearful. And this one's going to be called Liberty of the Brave, which has to do with those few souls like you and like me who pushed back on all this COVID tyranny and hysteria. So I think you're going to lead this one, and I'm going to turn it over to you and let you do your thing.
All right. So yeah, as you said there, we did the part one of this episode was Tyranny of the Fearful, about all the bad things that happened during the COVID era, and the fear, whether it was of getting the virus or losing your business or just public pressure, the different fear factors that came in and scared people out of living freely. And then this episode 2 now is going to be about the good things that came out of that era, Liberty of the Brave, about the people who stood up and maintained their freedoms however they could. And after going over the details in part 1, I'm definitely ready for the happy part here in part 2. So in doing this, I'll go over 3 different things. First, I'll kind of go over like my personal story with my family and what we did to stand up to this stuff. And then I'll go around the country and talk more about different people and groups and things that happened to stand up. And then thirdly, we'll talk about what we learned from this and how to go forward from here. So starting with my story. At the time, I think I've explained this in the prior episode, but like we were living in Borrego Springs, California. It's a tiny little town in the desert, the easternmost end of San Diego County. I think there's like 3,500 people there. So very small town. And we, like many people at the beginning of the COVID stuff, were like, oh, we don't know what this is. Let's kind of step back and see what's going on. But we swiftly realized it was a scam. Mostly when Congress passed the CARES Act, where they scounded all that money for this whole thing. And that's when we really started being like, uh-oh, wait a minute, this is weird. And so we, little by little, were like, okay, we don't want to play these games. What are we going to do? And we kind of watched everybody go nuts. And in our little town, a lot of people gave into the fear and were reacting very poorly, as I think, to things. And so my family... That's my husband, Sean, and I, and our 2 kids, who we homeschool, and then my parents who live on the property with us. And then our group of friends there, I don't know, there might have been like maybe up to 15 of us in this little town who were like standing up together. We're like, no way, we don't want to play these games. There wasn't very many of us amongst the many people who were playing the games. So the different little things that we did, I want to share to just kind of maybe be an example, because as you always say, Mark, this whole thing was a test, right? To kind of see where we're at and how we're going to react next time they do something, because they gained way too much power during this to let it go. So we need to be ready for it to happen again. So that's why we think it's important to share these things. So the local stores in our town were very strict on the lockdowns, close downs, minimizing the number of people that came in. They all wanted you to wear the mask and do the stuff. So that made us very hard in a town that was limited on resources anyway. How are we going to get what we need to survive without succumbing to this madness? Because we were super resistant to covering our faces with fabric that makes it hard for you to breathe and hide your beautiful smile. So we don't want to do that. So my mom at the time, she worked in kind of like an accounting area of not a pharmaceutical, a medical agency. And her boss, he was kind of cool because he was like, okay, well, they want us to do the mask thing, but he more so separated everybody and kind of gave them their little spaces. So that way they didn't have to suffocate themselves all day long. So they didn't have to wear the mask throughout the day, but just kind of going in and out. But at one point he said something to everybody about when you guys go out to the parking lot, you need to keep your mask on when you go to your cars because people see that and it's an example. And my mom was like, no way, man, you don't own that parking lot. You don't own my car. I am not following those kind of rules on my private time and my private space. And she was the only one that rebutted that. And her boss was like, oh, you're the only one that contested that. And she's like, yeah, well, good for me, you know? And and so it was a little thing that was just a little thing that she made a point and she stood her ground. And other people got, gives them something to think about. Even if they're not going to do it to you, it gives them something to think about. See that there is an opposition. And then my husband, Sean, he's a mechanic who works on cars. And so he has to get auto parts. And there was a Napa there where he would get his parts a lot. And they were super strict on the mask stuff. And he, at one point, he went in and we didn't even own masks, and they wanted him to put the mask on to come in. He's like, I don't have it. I'm in someone else's car. Like, I just need, and he had like $500 worth of parts on the counter. And they were so like staunch on it. He's like, fine, whatever, I'll get my parts elsewhere. And he left them on the counter. And he just started ordering parts from Rock Auto Line, a nice family-owned business where they just ship everything to you. And he ended up just doing business that way for the most part. And so his customers had to understand that, you got to wait a little bit longer for them to arrive, but this is how we're doing it now. And so it was just, once again, a little thing that he found a way around doing that. And then we did, with our group of friends there, reopen California protest. That was in May. And we just kind of went up the desert highway there with signs and flags and kind of just, one of our friends came out with a big old giant sign banner that our kids held that said something about being free since we've been free since 1776 and I won't give away my freedom. And we did all that kind of stuff. People drove by, a lot of people honked and were happy. Some people got on their phones and called the police. It was just really interesting that just a few of us kind of made a little impact there in that tiny town. We were very well known for being the problem in town, but we continued to gather. We did our holiday celebrations. We got together, we hugged each other. Nobody died because we loved each other during this time. And then we ended up, we already had a shop far away because we were in the tiny town, so grocery shopping, we would travel. At least, I think the closest Walmart was 45 minutes away. And so we started going there to do the order and pick up. So we didn't have to go in and do the mask thing and all that stuff. And eventually we ended up shopping in Yuma, Arizona, because they didn't have mask mandates. So we added an hour to our trip to go get things. I mean, I know we're pretty extreme, but we were really serious about not wanting to cover our faces. So we ended up shopping in a different state. And eventually that led to us moving to another state. So we moved to Arizona during all this because we just got so tired of this oppression and got out of there, moved here. And we moved here specifically because this county in Arizona didn't do any lockdowns, any mask mandates, the county and the cities within. And I called legislators, I called mayors, and I asked, what's going on? What are you doing in your county? What do you have mask mandates? Do you have lockdowns? Like, I wanted to, if I'm going to pick up my family and move away, I want to make sure I'm not moving into the same mess. So it was a very informed move that we made to get out of there. Obviously, lockdowns weren't the only reason. We were tired of California for a litany of other things. But so that was just kind of like, in short, our little story of just little things that we did to just say no. We're not doing this. We want to show our kids that you do not have to comply with tyrannical orders in your life. Maybe a little harder if you don't just go along and get along, but you will find your people and you will find your way. And of course, above all, God will provide the path if you're doing it to honor him. So we got out of there, and now we are here in Arizona, where we're still living.
I think when I hear this story, first of all, you had a lot of courage to do that, because it's so easy to just. I think you said in the last episode, there's so many people who just didn't think much about it and just did it and without any thought, right? And that's just as bad as the people who were, believing in all this garbage that they were throwing at us. But when you think about your, call it bravery, if you will, in terms of how you guys pushed back, that ties into a lot of what we've already talked about in so many different episodes, right? We talked about executive orders. We talked about nullification. Okay, because in a sense, it's a form of nullification
Yeah.
as to what you did. All right, and I think I used in the nullification episode the Nancy Reagan line I stole from her: "Just say no."
Just say no.
Just say no. She used it for the drug campaign she was on, but just say no. No, you don't have the power to do that. Executive orders, the governor cannot shut the state down. The governor cannot tell a restaurant you can only have 25 patrons in your restaurant. But everybody kind of, and now the police force would come in and arrest you. And boy, I wish I owned a restaurant, and I wish I got arrested in that regard, because I'd be a very rich man today. Okay.
Right.
And but everybody sort of kind of fell in line on that one. And nobody.
It was interesting to see too, the reactions to people when we would stand up or question. Even when you just question these things, people were like, oh, their eyes would get big over their mask, and they didn't know what to do with us, because most people just went along. Like sometimes we would like order food from the taco shop there or whatever, and we'd go in to pick it up. It's funny because it's a small town and everybody knows everybody. So when Sean would show up, people would come to the door. No, not you. You can't come in, because they knew he wasn't going to comply. But he's like, I already ordered my food. So are you going to waste all that food and throw it away? Or are you just going to bring it to me here at the door? Here's the cash. And so they would just bring him stuff at the door. So we kind of like made them have to think a little bit. How can I do this? One of our friends made Sean a shirt during that era that says "banned for life," because he got banned from everywhere and everything. But yeah, it did. It was kind of, I guess, it was just interesting to pose a challenge to people. Like,
but
okay, so not everybody's into this.
We don't have that notion, and we're continuing to allow the government at the federal, state, and local level to continue to erode away our freedoms. Okay.
And they just go along.
Yeah. And anyway, well, commend you for that. Took a lot of courage. And hey, by the way, great lessons for your two children. Phenomenal. And I think they'll be telling their grandkids about this someday. So
yeah, we've definitely gotten through a monumental time in history, right?
Your great grandmother was some crazy lady, man. You should have seen this lady. And your great grandfather was, I could just hear it now, so.
Yeah. Pass those stories down.
Awesome.
And it's funny how, just because it's this informational warfare, it's not like we're going out into battle yet. In a way, you kind of are by doing this stuff. It's a more informational battle, but here we are fighting it. Okay, so let's get into things that kind of happen around the country. And there's so many great patriots that stood up, and I have some of them here by name, but so many will go unmentioned by name, yet their stories just will live on in my heart forever as examples of freedom and hope. So And remember too, during this 2020 situation, not only do we have the lockdowns and the mask mandates and all that going on, but we also have the riots, the BLM riots were happening, dubbed, the Summer of Love. We always like to call it by that, as that mayor did in Seattle called it. So a lot of these things I'm going to talk about kind of coincide with both of those situations and how they all merge together during this madness. And between those two, scenarios, we saw a vast difference in behavior from red states to blue states, right? We got a really clear picture of the difference of governing, heavy-handed government and at least a little more light-handed governments from the different states. And in some of that, just got to give a shout out to South Dakota, and their legislator and governor did not ever shut down.
No, Kristi Noem, it's a small state. It's not a lot of people there, but Kristi Noem was phenomenal in terms of how she handled this. She basically said, hey, I'm going to let the citizens decide on their healthcare choices.
Yep.
And that's the way it should be. If they want to wear a mask, fine.
Yep.
If they don't, fine. If they don't want to go to a place where people aren't wearing masks, that's fine too. They could do that. It's all free choice and it's all your own decision. And she was the one, and I know everybody kind of lauded DeSantis on how brave he was, but he wasn't at first. And somehow Cuomo up in New York got lauded as this unbelievable hero, and he probably personally killed more people than anybody else. But
he's the worst.
But no, so South Dakota to me was the star in this whole thing when it comes to a state.
I think they're the only state that didn't shut down at all, because there was a few that opened early, but I'm pretty sure they're the only one that didn't do any of it.
Yeah.
Because and I do have a mention here for Ron DeSantis, because even though they did close down at first, one of the things I really appreciate about what he did was he actually apologized about it. He said, well, that wasn't right, and we're sorry, and we didn't realize how it was going to hurt everybody, and and then moved on. And I think that's really cool, really rare to kind of show that kind of humility. So I appreciated that.
That takes character to do that. So yes. Yes.
I think Alabama and Georgia opened pretty quickly, and it was just interesting to watch. You're like, oh, they're open. Weird, right? But they're open now. That's great. And then I remember in Michigan, because their governor was one of the worst.
By the way, let me stop you there for a minute. That just reminded me of something. The politicians think it would be chaos, Armageddon, if we shut down the government. But they had no problem shutting down the economy.
Oh, I know, right?
Okay. And, oh yeah, by the way, no public official lost a dime of salary. No state or local employee lost a dime in salary. Nope. So 45 million people lost their jobs, but none of these politicians lost anything. None of them.
Nope. There was no loss to them. And some of them even got voted back in again for round 2 afterwards, right?
It just came to me that it's so detrimental to shut down our government, our federal government. Shuts down on the weekends anyway, by the way. Try to call them. Okay. But
I like when they shut down.
Yeah, because they can't pass any more laws. I think it's great when they shut down. The more less laws they pass, the better. But
that's right.
But they shut the economy down. 600,000 family businesses gone forever. 45 million people out of work. I mean,
awful.
I don't know what to tell you.
Awful. Well, and then too, and speaking of government still, so we look at the states, I think Michigan, New York, California were some of the notoriously worse on lockdowns.
All at the time being run by tyrants. But anyway.
Yeah, so it was just interesting watching the different states, and I think it really gave a lot of people, definitely my family, a bigger picture, a closer look at how different the states are.
Yep.
And we all have, at least in essence, the protection of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. But yet each state has its own form of government. And though it's supposed to be a promised republic form of government, it was really interesting to see how each state governs differently and the different things they put into place to manage something like this. So that was really fascinating to watch. And then that went down from the state level into the county level. And, you know, even in California, there were some counties that were living freer during COVID than some counties in Arizona. You know, it was like county by county, depending on who your sheriff was. I had never before realized how important your sheriff is, because if he's not going to enforce unconstitutional orders, then you're going to be able to live more freely. But if your sheriff is a bad guy who's going to enforce all this stuff and come and shut down your business and lock everybody up, then you're going to be in trouble. And that could happen no matter what kind of government your state government is, depending on local legislation could cause problems or opportunity. Contrary to the state, depending. So we saw a lot of that going on. One of my friends lives in Tehachapi, California, which is a little tiny town east of Bakersfield. And they hardly even would notice California was going through this stuff, because they just didn't lock down and their businesses were open and their school boards voted against masks and vaxes and all that stuff. And so they just kind of kept on living free, where there's some places like in even in Texas, like Austin and Dallas are more liberal, you know? So it's like, it's just really interesting to see the operations of government during this and how they reacted and how each level of government, from the top, the feds down to the mayor, you know, the president to the mayor, how these offices affect our daily lives. So then that gets into another thing that was hugely, on one hand, disappointing, but also very exciting, was how the churches handled this. A lot of churches shut down and closed their doors and left their people hanging, maybe with an online service or whatever. We kind of talked more about the bad part in the first episode. But today we're talking about the good churches, the churches that refused to close their doors. And I have a few of them by name here, like Jack Hibbs, the pastor of Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills in California. He said, I can't close those doors. Those are God's doors, not mine. They are not mine to close. And so he stayed open the whole time. I had a friend that was going there, and their church grew in leaps and bounds because they were open. And so other churches that closed, the congregants came over and went to his church instead. John MacArthur in Northern California, he stayed open. And that was a whole fuss. I think he got all kinds of fines and all kinds of trouble. But he made a documentary about it now called, I think it's called Essential, the Essential Church or whatever. I do want to watch that one day to learn more about it. But I do know that he made a bold stand and stayed open anyways. Our little church in Borrego stayed open. It was really cool how they did it. They just did church on the lawn outside. So it was more work for them to go set up all the chairs and bring the instruments out and stuff. And it's the desert, so it was hot. So we started at 7 a.m. instead of 9 a.m. because nice, cool desert morning under the olive trees. But that was really cool.
That, though, we might be congratulating them, but the whole thought of moving outside in that regard, kind of, they have one foot in one camp and another in another. You know, it's like either you're going to reject it or not, and that to me, I give them half credit for that.
Half credit. Yeah, I thought it was cool because it's that town, man. Like it made it harder for people to give them grief, you know, because you're like, yeah, well, we're outside. So it worked out. And then there was across the whole country, some states or churches did like drive-in parking, which like a drive-in church where they got to drive up and listen and watch, which you would give half credit for. But then some of those churches that did that got in trouble. Like the cops came and were like, you can't be out here in the parking lot, you know. And then yeah, some churches were like, nope, we're open no matter what. And here it is. And I just think that the churches that stayed open, one, they did grow. That's a fact. A lot of those churches did grow. And then what a time for the church to make itself unavailable. I just think that's utterly wretched for the ones that closed, and absolutely commendable for the ones that stayed open. That they know their number one authority is God, and they
Chrissy,
kept
just go back to our episode. I'm looking for the number here. When you and I did the Communist Manifesto, episode 11. Um, that is one of the tenets of Marxism.
Yep.
The Communist Manifesto. I've got it right here in front of me here. You could see the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Frederick Engels. And
Mhm.
one of the tenets, the 10 tenets of this doctrine is to take away your God. And that's
Yep.
exactly what they did.
Because they want to be
Well,
your
they tried to
God.
do. I'm sure they didn't take
Yeah.
it away, but they tried to do that, but by closing
Yep.
down these churches.
And which I think is why the Bible makes such a big deal about false teachers too. And because here you are, the shepherd leading these people to the Lord, and to where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty, as the good book says. And so any pastor who barred people from access to communion, to fellowship, but I just think it's really bad. My aunt's church in Spring Valley, California, their pastor, he kind of did a mockery of how like strip clubs were allowed to be open, but churches weren't, and they stayed open anyways. And he he came out with like a scarf on his neck, and he like twirled it off and did his little tease dance. It was like, hey, we're a strip club now, we're allowed to be open. If they're allowed, we're allowed. So I thought that was kind of silly. So yeah, like I said, the churches that stayed open, I commend them. I think it was great, it was honorable, and so needed at a time like this. Okay, businesses. Now we'll get into businesses. Restaurants were a big one that were hit by this, and some of them stayed open anyways and took that risk and fought that fight. A lot of hairstylists. I remember I kept hearing about hairstylists that were staying open anyways, and there was one gal in Texas that was like getting in all kinds of trouble for it. And well, remember when Pelosi got her hair cut by that lady during it? So that lady was obviously at least cutting Pelosi's hair. I don't know who else she was doing.
Yeah, that lady in
Uh,
Texas got prosecuted and all that, but she's at least she stood up. And it's funny. I just came back from Connecticut just yesterday, and during the week I was there, we went to one of our favorite Japanese restaurants with family, and they just opened a couple months ago. Now here we are.
oh,
Yeah, here we are in December of 2023.
3 years later.
Part of it was their choice. I think they make more money, quite frankly, on takeout than they do with, but
Yeah.
still, it's like, and I talked to the owner who I know, and he said we just couldn't find any help. Okay, which is
Wow.
another
Oh, a nightmare that came of
well,
this.
another economic impact of what the government
Yeah.
did with these trillions of
Mhm.
dollars of bailouts, where people just didn't have to work anymore. I do know people who earned more money through the government bailout than they did in their jobs. Okay, and so
Yeah. Yep.
it got really tough to find labor, and it still is tough to find labor right now.
Mhm. That's
You
a
know,
problem.
so yeah.
Um, there was a guy in, I think it was New Jersey, uh, Murphy is the governor. I believe that's New Jersey, or was the governor. I don't know if he still is. But this guy owned a gym there. Ian Smith is his name. He's all famous on the social media now because of this. That's why I kind of followed his story. But he had a gym and they wanted him to close it, and he refused to close. And they took the doors off, so there were no doors to close. And so his big buff gym guys would go stand at the door and be like, "Yeah, well, there's no door to close, buddy. Move on," And people were just in there working out, doing their thing. I thought that was super
By the
cool.
way,
There's
I went into a gym. I went into a gym during this whole mess. People were working out on like treadmills and stuff with masks on.
goodness.
Talk about healthy, right? I mean, you're limiting your airflow. You got a mask on and you're doing aerobic exercise.
I don't even get
A
it.
good friend of mine in Connecticut, his son is an unbelievable pianist and also a singer. And he was at he did a Christmas choir at Yale. And he showed me a video. Actually, he was here when I was running for Congress. He tapped into it live and we were watching it, right? I go, they all have masks on. The choir had masks on.
The choir?
You cannot make this stuff up. The choir
Oh,
had masks on. I'm glad they weren't playing the trumpet or something. What would they have
oh my
done?
goodness. Well, remember the California banned singing in churches. Gavin Newsom was like, you can't sing in
Yeah,
church. It's too
of
much
course. Yeah, yeah,
spray.
yeah. Well, I just can't understand how, if CO2 is a poison, that's what they tell us.
That's what they
Well,
say.
the climate crowd tells us that, right? CO2 is a poison, poisonous gas. Then why are you going to make me wear a mask? Because when I exhale, that's what I exhale, CO2.
Ugh, so gross.
You
It's
can't
so
use, you
gross.
can use, it's so easy to use the logic against them. But anyway,
Yeah.
I digress.
Well, and how wild to think that we lived in a time where it was like forbidden and illegal to sing a hymn in your church. I mean, we know there's been times in history where church itself as Christian church is illegal, but not in America. Good grief. Okay, so I mean, businesses, there's many, we can go on and on about those examples, but I commend any business who stayed open, who took the risk, who took well, in some cases the beating. Like the one store down there in I think it's Cave Creek. I think that's down in your area of Phoenix, down there somewhere.
Yep,
um
just north of me, 2 miles north of me right now.
okay, so T Slinger is their name, and they sell patriotic t-shirts and whatnot, and they stayed open, and Antifa came and like attacked them for staying open during the lockdowns, and they had a whole standoff and got all famous for it, and their business boomed after that.
You mean the paid protesters?
Yeah, totally. Okay, well then let's get into protests. I think that's next on my
Hey, by the way,
list.
if you're talking about business, though, before we get off the business side of this thing,
Okay.
let's not forget that there's some people that made a lot of money on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of money being made, starting with vaccines.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, if you go back, Christy, to the episode you and I did on the military industrial complex, which was episode 9, Pfizer is the 4th largest defense contractor.
Good grief.
Okay, go figure that out. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
there were
Connect
people
those
that made
dots.
a lot of money in this whole deal, and I'll give you one more anecdote. There was a CEO of, I forget which company it was. He was having all his people do Zoom calls for their meetings, right? And he
Yeah.
insisted on every employee on a Zoom call, sitting in their home, to wear a mask.
On Zoom. Talk about your
You
political yard sign, right? Like we said last
if
time.
you asked me to come up with some fake story about this whole hysteria, I would never want to come up with that one because nobody would believe it.
No,
Okay, but it happened. The CEO made his people wear masks on a Zoom call.
that really happened. Like you think
You,
back, you're like, so much crazy stuff happened. That's like way up on the list.
and I
That
think I
is
told you
way up
last time
there.
in the last episode that my nephew's son, who plays water polo for a high school, he did play water polo. They were back practicing, but without the ball. Okay, in a California high school.
Oh,
And my wife going to physical therapy after she had foot surgery, and they took the chairs out of the physical therapy office.
oh my goodness.
I
It
mean,
was so crazy.
you just cannot. I don't know.
I think, well, and
And
that
by the way,
idea
all
leads.
these people vote. Okay, that's the other thing. They
Don't
vote.
forget. Yeah. Well, and I think
Sorry.
that that leads well into the next section, the
Okay,
protest, because it was
save
really
me.
fun to
Please save me.
watch. It was fun to watch like that crazy kind of stuff happen, like you're talking about. And then, so now we'll get into like the more specific incidences where people said no to that kind of crazy stuff. One of the things, remember, I think one of the first big protests that happened was in Michigan, and it was at the state capitol, because remember their governor, she's the worst. She wouldn't let them buy seeds, garden seeds, or like home improvement stuff. You're like, okay, I'm locked at home, I might as well paint my living room, and like, nope, you can't buy paint, so they went to the capitol to protest that madness. And I remember watching it live, and it was a pretty good show. And at that time too, everyone's like, oh, they're all gonna die because they're all gonna give each other COVID, and made them all sound like white supremacists and all that stuff. And people didn't die, and everybody lived, and they got to express their grievances, and nothing really came of it. But that was a pretty big gathering and a big deal. at the time. In California, the Freedom Angels is a group here that did a lot of reopen protests that kind of all over the state, at the Capitol or in LA, at the beaches or whatever. And they would just get people together to say, no, we don't like this. At one of their Capitol protests, they got the police ended up kind of attacking, like, or warding off the crowd almost violently, and the protesters, and detained a bunch of them. I remember there was a pastor there. I can't remember the name of his church, but he got detained for protesting to reopen. And then while he was detained, he was like giving the gospel to the other guys in the detainment area. And I thought that was pretty cool. So they did a lot here in California, or there in California. A bunch of groups like that rose up during this time, which was cool to see people coming together with their people and making a stand on their own, just like we did our little protest in Borrego. A lot of things like that happened. I thought it was cool that during all this madness, Donald Trump kept doing his rallies, which were huge gatherings across the country, all different states and stuff. There was Sturgis. I think I'm saying that right. I said it wrong yesterday.
Sturgis is in Rapid City, South Dakota, every year. Yep, I was there.
Yeah, and they have the big biker
Yep.
party. So they all went and gathered. And South Dakota was open anyways, but still there was no lack of media shaming when they did that. So it's kind of cool to see them get together and do that anyway. At Mount Rushmore on 4th of July, Trump did the, and it was in, rebellion. They did the little gathering there when they shouldn't have been, and they got shamed for it. They did the 4th of July gathering, which was fun. Then there was, on 4th of July, speaking of 4th of July, Gavin Newsom banned fireworks and fun, right? You weren't allowed to celebrate our nation's independence. But then over LA, when there was like a news helicopter flying around that night, and people were launching fireworks from all over the county, just from their houses, their backyards, just like pew, pew, fireworks going off everywhere. And I just thought that was a really fun little way to rebel, and on Independence Day of all things. Then we have, this is one of my favorites, that there's a skate park in California that got closed because, how dare you go outside and breathe fresh air and have fun in the sunshine during this. They closed down a skate park and covered it with sand so that you couldn't ride your skateboard there at all, right? Well, a bunch of dirt bikers went in and started riding their dirt bikes around in the sand instead. I thought that was a really fun way to rebel.
It's amazing, though, how they go out of their way, excuse my language, just to piss you off.
Yeah.
They actually work really hard at this to do something like that.
And paid a lot of money for it. Like, your tax dollars in
better
California
believe
there
it.
went to this.
You better believe it.
Mhm.
It's just absolutely mind-boggling what these people won't do.
Yeah, it's nuts. Well, and I think I mentioned this last time, how Gavin Newsom also closed the deserts in California. You weren't allowed to go to the desert. I
Well,
have a
it's dangerous
picture.
because the mafia buries a lot of people out there, so you got to be careful on the desert.
Yeah.
Well, he was I think I said this last time. He had this great idea where he said, if you're going to go out to eat in a restaurant, you have to take your mask down, put your fork in your mouth, and put it back up again while you're chewing.
Oh my goodness.
No, you're not supposed to touch your mask. I know a lot about PPE because like I told you, I'm in pharmaceutical, right? And you're not supposed to touch any part of your PPE like that. And but this is what these people do. Christy, this all ties right into, you give a tyrant a little opening.
Mm-hmm.
There's an executive order. How we talked about the abuses on the executive orders. We talked about the abuses with the military-industrial complex, and so many other things that we talked about. You give these guys just a little sliver of daylight, and they will go into that and open it up and just take control and take away your freedoms, because the more power they have, I hate to say it, the more money they make.
Yeah, they will use this opportunity to live out their tyrannical daydreams. It almost
I
like
just had this conversation with Jack Fowler, who is a friend of mine, who is the MC of Victor Davis Hanson's podcast. And if you guys haven't checked that podcast out, you really should. And we were talking about the fact that, the power that people want, and they want you to, and by the way, this goes right back to this Communist Manifesto, okay? They want you to worship the government, no other deity. And that is so opposite of what the founders had in mind for our Constitution. And but they don't want you to, and they want you to have problems. They want to pit you against each other. So this was a perfect playground for these guys, because COVID pit neighbors against neighbor. It was very reminiscent of what happened in Nazi Germany when neighbors were ratting out neighbors. Look at Anne Frank. I've been to her house in Amsterdam. It was chilling to be there, she had to hide in that little space that I went into for 2 years. Neighbors upon neighbors. You had neighbors, I had relatives saying, I don't think we can come to your house because what if they see all the cars in your driveway, for
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, and what if a neighbor calls another neighbor, which has happened. And
Yep.
all of a sudden people ratting everybody out, and everybody becomes a social justice warrior. I'm on a rental car bus in Boston, packed like sardines, and the lady's screaming at me because I don't have a mask on. And I asked her, well, I said, well, I think you first should give me 6 feet social distancing, which she couldn't do. She's standing 2 feet in front of me. Okay. Everybody became a police agent. They became a medical expert. They became a legal scholar. And all of a sudden, before you know it, divisions were drawn. And that is exactly what Karl Marx wanted to do. That's what Stalin did when he split,
Well, because they used the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat, right? So like the
proletariats,
working
yes.
class.
And that's exactly, as a matter of fact, in that little conflict, they had them pitchforking each other. Okay.
Yeah.
And you know, and that's exactly what these people do. That's how they derive their power, whether it's race, religion,
Mhm.
sexual orientation,
Health, medical, like were you wearing a
gender.
mask or
In this
not?
case, now
Yeah.
the mask became a symbol of what side you were on. Oh, no
Yes.
mask, you're a Trump guy. Oh, mask,
Hmm.
you're on the other side. And it became a political football, just like climate change has. And
Yep.
the more these people throw these hand grenades into America, and we bite on those hand grenades and we
Mhm.
start fighting for whatever cause we think is important, they're planning their next COVID.
Yep.
They're planning. I hate
Get
to
ready
say
for the
like I
next
freeze
thing.
it, but they're planning their next move. While
Because
we're
as long as we're
busy,
fighting with each other,
right,
right, they can just
right,
they can come in and take over.
yeah,
Um, and I guess, and that's what was so hard about this time. And for all these people who did stand up in all these different ways, you were putting yourself at risk. You're putting your family at risk. You're standing up in a way that's not just, exercising your First Amendment right, but like you are putting your life on the line in a lot of ways. And people did that with, as we're saying, business staying open, churches staying open, family gatherings, having Thanksgiving dinner with your family was now like rebellious, right? But this also, of course, goes into the BLM stuff that happened during it. It's so crazy happened at once. And that did really spike the race divide, as you're saying, like with this communist stuff. They really tried to use that to separate us there, as if the medical tyranny wasn't enough. They threw in the race stuff. And as these rioters were tearing towns apart and burning things down, in some places the citizens stood up, and I want to talk about them today because this is about the happy part. So my hometown, La Mesa, I spent most of my young years there, La Mesa, California, and early on, shortly after the George Floyd incident, which was, I believe, in May 2020, the rioters came into La Mesa and they barricaded the freeway and they burnt down some of the buildings. They looted the grocery stores. This was crazy because La Mesa's always had a pretty strong police force, and it's a cute little downtown. And I mean, they burned down like the bank my mom used to work at, and the looted the Vons I used to shop at. So it was really, and I wasn't living there at the time. I was already here, but it was like, no, I was in Borrego, so I was already out of there. But I was like, whoa, that's crazy. They're messing up my hometown. And they caught everybody by surprise because that was very early on. But then it was, I don't remember how much later, but they threatened to come back. But this time, the town was ready for it. And the people stood up and protected their businesses. And they stood outside. Of course, you can't be armed in California, but they stood outside of their businesses, arms crossed. And maybe some people had sticks or rocks ready, who knows. But my cousins were a part of that. Some of my cousins stood out there to protect their businesses in their town. And the police were ready this time. So they kind of channeled the little mob to walk them around town while they're doing their little chants. And they walked them way up this big hill. And they got all out of breath and they were all tired. And by the time they came back down, it was like, well, this town's ready. We can't just loot and burn this time. So they didn't. Similar thing happened here in Prescott. This was before we moved here, but this is one of the reasons we moved here when I saw this happen. The rioters, the mob came into downtown Prescott on their buses because, you know, they ship them in, as you always say, the paid protesters. They came into downtown Prescott, and the men of this town got together, and you can carry your firearms in Arizona. You are still allowed to defend yourself and your property here. So the men stood out there with their guns, armed and ready, and protected their town and their businesses. Were ready to protect their town and their businesses. And as soon as those rioters got off the bus, looked around, saw those men, saw those guns, got back on the bus, and they went home. It was so cool. And the mayors of both Prescott and Prescott Valley were like,
they'll scurry like cockroaches. By the way, you can't think of too many towns in this country that are more patriotic than Prescott. You know, I mean,
it's so cool. I was like, man, I want to live there.
That's why I had my office there when I ran for Congress. I said, oh, it's got to be over here, you know. And awesome town. It's a great town. But
it's great people,
great
and
people.
they weren't going to mess with that stuff.
Got a great mayor. You got some unbelievable patriots there. They really honor their veterans on Veterans Day and Memorial Day, and it's just an unbelievably patriotic town, you know.
Well, even like during Christmas time right now, they do all kinds of Christmas fun there at the square, and they just did, when they did the lights, when they started the Christmas lights for the year and turn them on, they did like they did Bible reading and sang old hymns, and I'm like, what a great town. It's so old fashioned stitle here. I just love it.
You know, the first time I went,
and when those,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, the first time I went into Prescott was we were checking out where we were going to put our office for our, because as you know, we have a 63,000 square mile district. Okay, more than half the state of Arizona, and we were checking out where we were going to put it, and we drove in at Christmas time into Prescott with all those lights on, and that just blew me away. Cool.
It's so nice. And I love that people love it. So the spirit that keeps this town beautiful and safe and enjoyable, the people were like, no, you're not coming in to ruin this. We love this. We built this and we love this.
No, they get it.
And even the mayors were standing up and they were like, no, the mayor of Prescott Valley here, he said at that time, Antifa and BLM are terrorist organizations and they will be treated as such.
Awesome. Yeah.
So that was awesome. Very heroic and wonderful.
Awesome. By the way,
if you
really want to know what Prescott's all about, I just tell people this story. Way back, I think it was in 1800s, I think. There's a bar right there on Whiskey Row, and they actually have a street called Whiskey Row. So how cool is that? And the bar is still there. The actual bar itself, the wooden bar. Okay, this thing is about a mile long, and the building caught on fire. The patrons took all the alcohol out and picked up this big, heavy wooden bar, which must have weighed a couple thousand pounds, brought it out into the green, set it up, put the drinks there, sat down, and watched the fire burn.
Yeah. Okay. It's the palace.
that bar is still there now. I forget which bar. But you know, I tell that story just to say what an awesome town that is. You know?
We still have the spirit of the Wild West.
We're not gonna let this fire ruin our good time. We're gonna pull the bar outside.
Yep. It's a fun story. Yeah.
And they didn't wear a mask. They didn't wear a mask when they did that too. No mask.
Yeah, they just did it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so that was really fun and seeing, and there's other stories around the country where
Right.
people stood up against this stuff. Like, well, now there's that song, Jason Aldean song, "Try That in a Small Town," right? Um, so I think that was very admirable and honorable of the men that did that in their towns across the country. So cheers to them. Which also leads to my next point that during this era, gun sales went up through the roof,
Oh yeah.
right? People were like, oh no, these people are going to hurt me and my family. Let me get a gun for the first time. First time gun buyers are like record numbers in 2020. And it's funny because a lot of people who were anti-gun prior went to try to buy one and they were like, whoa, it's really hard to buy a gun. They realized all the regulations they've been voting for all these years made it difficult for them to get what they finally knew that they should have.
One of my consulting clients is a gun manufacturer. I won't name who it is, but you'd know it if I told you. And this was a perfect storm. Not only did you have Biden alone would have sold a lot of guns, okay, because everybody gets, that's what Obama. When I went into the SHOT Show in Las Vegas when Obama was president, they had a huge sign that said #1 gun salesman of the year, and they had Obama's picture, right?
Yep.
But you had Biden, who we know his stance on guns,
Mm.
although he gets protected by them on a daily basis, and his son is in love with guns.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. That's okay, I guess. But then you had the Black Lives Matter,
Yep.
and you had COVID.
Mm-hmm.
It was a perfect storm for gun sales.
Yep.
Perfect storm. And yeah, I mean, gun manufacturers couldn't keep up.
And I put that on the positive side. People realized the importance of the Second Amendment during that and really understood
Exactly.
why it matters so much.
Exactly right.
Then I think I do just have a little mention here. One of the cool things that came out of this was all the different podcasts that came out during the time where people were like, whoa, this is crazy. I want to talk about it. I have a few friends who did that, or I've learned about some maybe older podcasts that finally you're like, oh, wait, this guy makes sense now, And so just kind of the back alley news, where people, regular citizen journalism, where people were like, hey, this is crazy. I want to tell you what I'm learning. And so to have the opportunity to do that so freely and to share the truth amidst all the lies on the level that it's been happening has just really been, I think, honestly, life-saving in a lot of ways.
I have no
And
idea why
that's a
people
good
go
thing.
through it. I have no idea why they go through the trouble. You got CNN, now you got Fox News, you got MSNBC. Why do we need
Mhm.
more news? I mean, they're
Why would you
bringing
need
it
more?
to us, right? They're bringing us the truth on a daily basis, right?
Yeah, it was really great to see that people got tired of that and were like, we're going to do our own thing and freedom of the press, hooray. That was really cool. And then I guess my last thing on this list here is mass migration. And my family was a part of that. We're like, our state's crazy. We don't want to live like this anymore. We're moving to a freer state. And that happened at a historic scale.
Yeah.
The three states who lost the most population during this era were California, New York, and I think Illinois. And the states that gained the most population are Florida, Texas, and Arizona. And that's just not that it's easy, it's really hard to move states, but it's a simple way to vote with your feet, as they say, right? So I'm not going to give this crazy state my money anymore. I'm done paying them the taxes. I'm going to go somewhere where I can raise my family the way that I want to, which is a really good testament to the beauty of the United States and the whole concept. And so seeing that go into action was really cool and encouraging. And New York and California lost Senate, Congress seats during that.
Yep.
I can't remember how many. I think California might have lost up to 3. And you're like, that's a really powerful way to express your grievances. Like, I don't want you guys representing me anymore. I'm out of here. So removing your population, lowering the population lowers their representation in Congress. And that, honestly, the census happened when I was still in California. I was kind of bummed out. I'm like, man, too bad we didn't move a little bit before, so I could have counted as part of that. But I'm like, how many people like my family moved after the census? So now when we do our next census, they might even lose more seats. So that would be great.
Okay, and
so I think that's another good thing that came of this.
What does New York, Illinois, and California have in common? And what does Texas, Florida, and Arizona have in common? Boy, doesn't
Yeah.
take much to figure that out, does it?
Hmm.
Right?
Yep. And so that's just a really simple way to show where your sentiments are, like what you want, and then to be able to move to those states that have more freedom and what you're looking for, and be able to embrace that, enjoy that, and hopefully fight for it. I know most people I know that moved here to Arizona during this came here for the freedom and are doing what we can to fight to keep it.
Christy, and again, I want to go back on some of the constitutional principles. Technically, these states are really independent nations. That was the vision.
Yes.
And the whole idea of what you just said, if you don't like it in one state, you could pick up and move to another state, right? That's exactly how this was set up. And again, another stroke of genius, if you think about how this whole thing was put together, the Constitution and the framework of our country. And that's exactly how this is supposed to work. And sooner or later, these, I think, as long as the government doesn't get in the way, which is a big if, the,
Yeah.
the these states will figure it out over the course of time. And
Yep.
and when I say the states will figure it out, it's really what I mean is the citizens will figure it out, not the government. The government won't
Mm.
figure anything out.
No, they'll never learn
But
anything.
I mean, we can't count on them to figure anything out. But the people really,
Hmm.
in effect, are the people who run these states, and they have mechanisms in which to do so. So hopefully we'll get back on track to some degree. But right now, it's not good. It's not good.
It's not. And this, and I guess this leads into my closing point here. Um, this whole era in history, we saw a lot of terrible things happen. A lot of, as we've said, you and I've said, we've kind of failed the test in a lot of ways.
Yep.
But also this part two here shows us, I think, the good things that did happen, the good things that did come of it. And so let's use those good things now to look at what did we learn and what can we do to prevent this kind of thing from happening again. And I think people did learn more about how our government operates. I think a lot of people that weren't paying attention before were like, whoa, 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 I don't like this. And they had some, even people who haven't read the Constitution, haven't read the Declaration, don't really know the details, but somewhere they're like, wait a minute, I think America is supposed to be more about liberty and justice for all. I remember that part, and it prompted them to start wanting to look a little bit more like, I don't think our government's supposed to be able to do all this stuff.
I
So
think
it got them questioning.
yeah, the next round of tyranny that they give us, will be more prepared and be a little bit smarter, right?
Yes.
The other thing we didn't talk much about was the whole educational side of this thing, because when we started allowing parents to see what was going on with our education system through Zoom, or whatever mechanism they used, that's when you started seeing, post-COVID, people showing up at more board of education meetings, more riots, and more tyranny being called out. Matter of fact, my hometown in Glastonbury, Connecticut, where I moved from to here, I escaped the communist state of Connecticut, was on this national map for a fist fight that went on. I happen to know one of the guys that was in a fist fight. Okay, a fist fight that happened at the Board of Ed meeting, and that made national news. Okay, and Glastonbury is also famous for starting the whole transgender thing, because that's where the transgender track and field person, that
Ugh.
made national news. So Glastonbury is kind of like an epicenter. It used to be a very Republican town. I ran the Republican town committee at the time, and we cleaned the slate with everything. But more and more liberalism came into the Republican Party, and I basically at one meeting said, I can't tell the difference between you and the Democrats
Right.
without
Yeah.
looking at your business card and seeing where the R is. Uh, and the only difference between you and them is you just want to raise taxes a little less than they do. Okay.
Communism light.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, right. Yeah. So, it's really sad to see how these great, red towns had turned into these blue towns, and part of that is a lot of people moved out, Christy. Okay,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? The people that moved out that were
Mhm.
dissatisfied, like me. Okay, although I
Mhm.
did technically move for other reasons, I probably wouldn't be there today if it wasn't for the reason I moved out 8 years ago. I probably wouldn't be in Connecticut anymore. It's they're going bat crazy with their gun laws. They're enacting gun laws now, Christy, where in your home you cannot have a loaded gun. You have to lock up your ammo separate from your weapon. And if your gun has a magazine in it, that's with no bullets, no ammo, it's still considered loaded, and you could be fined. Okay, so I could just see
Good
it now
grief.
where a burglar breaks in, you tell them to hold on while you open up your two safes and get your
Oh
info,
yeah.
and
Hold
then load your
on, let
gun.
me
Hold on for a
unlock
minute.
everything.
Okay, this
Yeah.
is what we got
Pause.
there. They got the duty to retreat law. We have the castle doctrine here in Arizona. We have
Yep.
the best gun laws here, I think, in the nation, quite frankly.
Yes.
But nothing. We've got to fight, though, Christy, to protect these things, because even in Arizona, you've got a lot of tyrants here. Look at the crazy governor we have, right?
Oh, I know. It's on the
And
down.
so you just don't know. And I'm not crazy about other Republicans, to be honest with you. We had one guy,
No, neither.
we had one guy that was running for Secretary of State on the Republican side at one time, wanted to abolish the Electoral College.
Yeah, they're not, our hope is not in this
I mean,
Republican Party. I'll tell you that.
how can you be a Republican and run for the Secretary of State's office and want to abolish the Electoral College? And he said, well, that was 8 years ago, and I revolved. Oh, wait a minute, you're in your 50s. Okay, at age 40, you should have had your, what, together. Okay, if you were a
Goodness.
young, high school kid or young college kid, I could see how you could be a little bit screwed up. Okay,
Well, and I
no,
think with
you are
where you started there,
born
the
a, and these are the people that we got wanting to run for office.
I know there's just
How can you trust them?
you
You should never
can't.
trust.
They don't even know any better than,
You should not
like you
trust.
said, they're the same. It's the one party. I had a friend one time say that they're left wing, right wing. It's the same bird, and it's pooping on us all. So it's like
It's a good way
that's
to
kind
say
of
it.
where we're at, right? And so it's like we can't look to the government for our solutions. And I think that's a lot of us learned that during this. And we need to fortify our homes and our families. And you did mention the education system there, which I can't believe I didn't bring that up. But one of the most positive things I would say that came out of this era is that people did learn that the public school system is trash, and homeschooling is on the rise like crazy.
Yep.
It has like quadrupled the numbers, and I think it's now up to 11% of the population homeschools, and that makes it officially like a mainline education force. It's no longer just like an outlier, and so it's more to be reckoned with there.
Percent, is that
And I think
11%
that,
nationwide?
yeah.
Do you know what it is? It's got to be higher in Arizona. I bet you it's 30-40%.
Yeah, it varies from state to state, I'm sure. And some states have more school choice stuff. And like Arizona's doing
Right,
that now with the ESA. Could do
right.
a whole episode on that. But it doesn't legally count as homeschooling if you're getting government funds. The ESA is a separate category. So homeschooling it independently is, I think, the 11%. But then when you count the parents who are using the ESA money to school at home, though it's not legally categorized as homeschooling, it's still parents at home schooling their children. So that number is even higher when you
I would be
factor that in.
that's a slippery slope. I'd be very careful of taking any government assistance.
Yeah, I'm not.
Once they start giving you money, they'll start setting the rules. And
With shekels come shackles.
yeah,
I don't do it. I homeschool independently. I don't want their money. I don't want them to know what I'm buying. I'm just like, leave me alone. These are my kids. I'm doing my thing. So yeah, it is a different category, but it's still better. It's a better start to getting you closer to independence, because some people are kind of afraid to ease into it. Easing into it helps. So with that, that's a huge win from this era, that
Yep.
parents are reclaiming their children en masse. And I would even venture to say that even if a parent is a little more liberal in their homeschooling for different reasons, even if they're not teaching them the same stuff, civics and American history that I'm teaching my kids, they're still going to have a more free thinking mentality. They're still going to get more love and comfort from their mothers. They're still going to build better bonds with their families. And I think they're going to turn out to be better citizens in the end, even if they're not learning the better things.
I have mixed feelings on that because I'm not convinced, as bad as the public school systems are, I am not convinced that some parents can do a better job. I'm just not convinced of it. But
I think if you just hang out and talk with your kids all day about whatever, they're going to learn more than they do
that's
at
one
public
problem.
school.
That's one problem.
But yeah, I
Anyway.
think so. Overall, the rise in homeschooling is a good thing. And I think that's going to benefit our nation in a big way as things unfold. So that goes in the big win bucket for me.
Yep.
So with all that, so we learned about our government, we're reclaiming how our government works, we're reclaiming our children. I think a lot of us have learned the importance of private property and what that actually means and how to assert our dominance over our property to protect it and defend it from either rioters or overbearing government. I think we kind of found our people that we connect with and relate with. New friendships have forged during this. Unfortunately, a lot of us lost friends or have been ostracized by family.
We did in family too. There's a lot of dissension still in our family over this whole issue. And hey, let it be what it is, because maybe that's what it was all about to begin with, But
yeah, because the friendships that have been forged afterwards are going to probably be stronger and more meaningful in the end because they're built on things that matter more in building a better future.
All right.
So, and then I
sorry.
think, as you often say, and you said at the beginning of this episode, I think one of the most important things that we've learned is the power of just saying no.
Yep.
Civil disobedience is the key. It's the route. It's the method of just peaceful non-compliance. No, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not wearing the mask. No, I'm not closing my business. No, I'm not, I'm going to sing at church, like whatever these things are, like just to embrace your God-given rights, to teach them to your children, to understand how things ought to work so that we can better shape them back into that mold. And I think it's funny because the end of all of our shows are kind of the same. The solution always is faith, knowledge, and courage, right? So we need to get back to trusting in God. We need to have the understanding of how things are supposed to work. And we need to have the courage to enact and to defend these things.
Maybe.
And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. And with that, I'm going to end with a quote that I have read before because I love it so much. I think I shared it in our Stamp Act episode. And this is from John Dickinson from his Letters from a Farmer Letters from a Farmer essays that he wrote during the Stamp Act era of 1765. And I think this sums up the sentiment of the COVID era. He said, "If you quietly bend your necks to that yoke, you prove yourselves ready to receive any bondage to which your lords and masters shall please to subject you."
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Yeah. And remember our friend Ben Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
I'll paraphrase: anybody who's willing to give up a little bit of safety for a little bit of freedom deserves neither.
Yep. You got to have dangerous freedom. I think Thomas Jefferson's the one that said that, or at least that's where I heard
Christy,
it from.
look, there's, the one thing I'll say about what you just went through is that this is probably the only country where that pushback could have happened.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend that just went to Italy. Her husband's from Italy. She spent time there. They said if they stepped out of their house, there were drones and police would be there to arrest them. If they stepped out of their house, okay. I guess inside their house is safer than outside. But I really believe this is probably the only country in the world where this pushback that you mentioned, albeit maybe not enough for your liking or my liking, could have happened. Okay. And if you think about all the things that have gone into the framing of our country, including the Second Amendment and others, that is a testament to a degree that we pushed back, And so, with that, I'll say, let's get ready for the next one because it's going to be coming. Next one's
Right?
going to be, yeah, yeah. It'll be something.
Don't be scared, get prepared.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's right. Well, Christy, let's close it here. Now, I want to make a
Mhm.
little bit of an announcement. Christy has decided to back away from the Constitution solution for a time being. She's got some personal commitments that she needs to work on and family commitments. So we won't be seeing her pretty face anymore if you're looking on YouTube or hearing her great voice. Uh, but I'm sure, will be back from time to time on different episodes. So I think there's a couple of them that she really wanted to get out. And I
Mhm.
told her, please let me know when you want to do those because there's some real hot spots that we never got to yet. By the way, we're just scratching the surface on this. So we're going to continue on this, Christy, but I really appreciate your inspiration of getting this thing going and how you and I kind of met and how you and I kind of uh, did that Vulcan mind melt, as they call it. Uh, and again, I want to go back to our first episode where you and I talked about the fact that I'm in the Best Buy parking lot, supposed to do a 20-minute errand, and an hour and a half later, I came home, and Diane said, "Where were you?" Christy and I were talking about the Constitution and all kinds of and we decided to do a podcast. So so I really appreciate your input, your effort, your support during my congressional run. You've got a great family, your dad, your mom, your whole family. First of all, and I'm still going to have to say, Ann's is the smartest one there. Your daughter's
She's pretty great.
she's awesome. No, I'm only kidding. You're all great. You're all great, and we hope to see you soon. I'm sure we will see you
Yes.
from time to time, and we'll go from there. Okay.
Yep. Thank you so much for having me for all of this. And I've learned so much from the research I've done and from the things that you've done and the talks that we've had. And I hope that it's been super helpful for everybody that's listened. I'm thankful for all the good reviews that we have gotten. And
Yeah,
I'm
we
so
got
glad that you're
plenty of good reviews. Yes,
gonna
yes.
and so I'm so glad you're gonna carry it on. And I do plan to come back with certain topics that I'm really excited about researching. So thanks for being willing to have me back.
Awesome.
And yeah, just thanks for everybody that's followed my part of this journey thus far. And keep learning.
And keep fighting, keep fighting, keep praying,
Keep
keep
fighting.
fighting. Yep. So, hi, Christy. I won't say goodbye. I'll just say next time. And
Yep.
and for the Constitution Solution, Christy Tyrone and Mark DeLuzio. God bless you. God bless America. And we'll catch you on the next go around. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Constitution Solution, one podcast under God. You can find other episodes on our website at 1787solution.com, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
We're your hosts, Christy Tyrone and Mark DeLuzio. Until next time, may God bless you and may God bless America.